What if I told you that the truth Hollywood never wanted you to see is hidden in a series of secret text messages between Blake Lively and Taylor Swift, messages so explosive they could change everything you think you know about this lawsuit about Justin Baldoni, about Reynolds, and about the fragile empire of power that holds it all together? Stay with me, because once you hear what I have to share, you will never look at this story the same way again. Oh my God, hello, my fam, gather close, because what I am about to share with you is one of those stories that you will not believe until you hear every single detail. And I promise you, this is not just gossip. This is not just tea. This is the type of bombshell that makes Hollywood tremble and makes even the most powerful celebrities feel the heat. Because this saga, the one that has been brewing between Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively with Taylor Swift's name whispered in the shadows, has now reached a new level of intensity. And I am here to give you the inside look that will make your jaw drop and keep you glued until the very end. Now let me set the scene. So many of you already know the background of this chaos. The lawsuit that Blake has kept alive against Justin Baldoni, the tension, the whispers, the endless speculation about whether Taylor herself would be dragged into this mess, and possibly even deposed, and everyone has been wondering, is Taylor really going to have to answer under oath about her private conversations? Is she really going to have her text messages made public? Could it actually happen? And while so many fans and insiders believed it was unlikely, I kept digging. And what I uncovered is even juicier than anyone imagined. Because while I did not find the answer I was originally searching for, I stumbled upon something so much bigger and so much more shocking that it changes the way we understand everything about this case and the motives behind it. Now you all know my own legal battle is over. I was dragged through the mud, I was targeted, I was hit with a subpoena, but I fought and I won. And while that chapter is behind me, I still carry the scars of it, and I know exactly how heavy and terrifying it feels to live under that spotlight when lawyers are circling and secrets are at risk of being exposed. So when I tell you what I am about to tell you, I say it with full awareness of just how devastating the fallout could be, because my impeccable sources, the ones who never steer me wrong, are whispering that Justin Baldoni's legal team has already had access to something that changes everything they have in their possession. Text messages between Blake Lively and Taylor Swift. Yes, you heard me right. Actual conversations, private, direct, unfiltered words that Blake shared with Taylor. And these messages have been reviewed, analyzed, and studied by Baldoni's team. And according to my sources, these texts are not good for Blake. Not at all. In fact, they are so troubling that people close to the case believe Blake will not allow this lawsuit to ever reach a courtroom because the risk of those messages becoming public is far too great. And here is where it gets even more shocking, because it is not only about what Blake did tell Taylor, it is also about what she did not tell her, what she chose to hide, what she avoided saying. And anyone who has ever been in a situation where words could reveal too much knows that sometimes silence is even more incriminating than an admission. And my source told me Verbatim Legal has had access now to all of the text messages, and they are not good for Blake. So take a moment and let that sink in. Because if this case ever did make it to trial, those texts would be entered into evidence, and once they are evidence, they become public. And once they are public, no team of lawyers, no amount of money, no carefully worded statements can undo the damage. Imagine the headlines, imagine the frenzy, imagine the fallout for Blake, and even for Taylor, who of course will fight with every ounce of power and every brilliant attorney she has to make sure those texts never see the light of day. And if you think this is only about Blake and Taylor, think again, because there is another key figure. Stephanie Jones. Yes, that name may not be as instantly recognizable to everyone, but those who know. And just like Blake, Stephanie has reason to fear what might come out in court. My sources tell me that for the very same reasons, she too is going to want a settlement, because nobody involved in this mess wants to have their private conversations splashed across the world. And if you think you have already seen the worst of the Wayfarer defendants, the endless threads of text messages that have leaked and shocked people over and over again, just wait, because compared to what is hidden, those leaks were nothing. And here is where things twist even deeper. Because Blake not only said things to Taylor that are now under scrutiny, she also said things to her own publicist, Leslie Sloan, and those exchanges, according to what I am hearing, are equally explosive and equally dangerous. And the very last thing Blake wants is to have those entered into evidence as well. And this is why I have been saying again and again that Blake is not going to want to risk trial. She can posture, she can file motions, she can keep her team working. But in the end, a settlement is the only way out. Because otherwise, her carefully built image comes crashing down in full view of the public. And the damage will not just be legal. It will be reputational. It will be personal. It will ripple through every corner of her world. And you know what? Else this explains why both sides are keeping everything so close to the chest. Why nothing leaks except what they want to leak. Why they are negotiating in the shadows. Because the reality is that this lawsuit is a powder keg, and everyone knows it. And here is something else. My sources made clear. Taylor Allison Swift has the strongest legal team in this entire saga. Her lawyers are sharp, relentless, and expensive, and they are already strategizing ways to ensure her private texts do not end up as evidence. They will use every procedural tool, every motion, every angle to block their admission. And if there is even the smallest chance of success, they will take it. Because the one thing Taylor will never allow is for her private conversations with Blake to become tabloid fodder. Can you imagine the chaos if they did? The fans would dissect every word, the media would spin it in 1,000 directions. And even though Taylor is one of the most untouchable figures in entertainment, the intrusion would be brutal. So yes, Blake has a lot to lose, but so does Taylor. Which makes this even more fascinating because it means the pressure to settle is not just on one side, it is on both. And that kind of pressure usually leads to quiet agreements. Behind closed doors agreements where neither side admits wrongdoing. No money necessarily changes hands, but both agree to silence confidentiality and carefully crafted public statements. And I am telling you right now, if this settlement happens, it will be the type of document that locks every single person into silence. Blake, Justin Taylor, Ryan Reynolds, Stephanie Jones, the Wayfarer defendants, every single player involved bound by confidentiality, unable to breathe a word, and that is why the stakes are higher than anyone realizes. Because if the trial happens, everything explodes. But if settlement happens, silence reigns, and the public is left forever, guessing what was really in those texts, what was really said between friends, and publicists and lawyers, and what was left unsaid that may have been the most revealing clue of all. And fam, let me tell you, this is where the story begins to truly twist into something so shocking and layered that even those who thought they had seen it all in Hollywood drama will be clutching their pearls, because when we look closely at what is happening behind the curtain, it becomes crystal clear that Blake is holding onto this lawsuit, not out of confidence, but out of strategy. She does not want a jury to ever hear these allegations. She does not want to sit on a witness stand and be forced to answer direct questions under oath. She knows, as do her lawyers, that the bar to prove what she is accusing Justin of is set incredibly high. And unless there is irrefutable evidence, the chances of her winning in open court are slim to none. And that is exactly why she refuses to simply drop the case entirely, because if she dropped it, she loses all control. But by keeping it alive, she keeps leverage. She keeps the ability to negotiate. She keeps the illusion that she can still decide how this ends, and that is power in its own right. So what we are witnessing here is a chess game, not a sprint. Blake and her very costly legal team are angling for an outcome where no money is exchanged, where the settlement is written in stone with ironclad confidentiality clauses, where each side is given the right to approve every word of a joint public statement that clears them of wrongdoing. And above all, where silence is bought and paid for silence that extends not just to Blake, not just to Justin, but to Taylor, to Ryan, to Stephanie, to every single Wayfarer defendant, to the publicist, to the inner circle. Every last person bound by the same gag that guarantees the truth never reaches the surface. And you have to ask yourself, why is silence worth so much? What is hiding in those texts that makes them scramble behind closed doors to ensure they never go public? Because my sources tell me these are not harmless, casual conversations. They are conversations filled with context, timing, and tone that paint a very complicated picture of Blake's motives and her narrative. They reveal inconsistencies. They reveal admissions. They reveal an entirely different version of events than the one she has pushed out publicly. And even more shocking is what she chose not to say to Taylor. Those deliberate silences, those intentional omissions that, when examined alongside what she did say, form a pattern that is deeply unhelpful for her case. And if that ever became evidence in open court, the ripple effects would be catastrophic. Not just for her reputation, but for her credibility as a whole, and credibility once shattered is nearly impossible to repair, especially in the high-stakes world of Hollywood, where perception is everything, where one crack in the perfect facade can bring the whole structure crashing down. And the legal teams know this, they understand the danger, and that is why both camps are quietly maneuvering toward the same finish line, even if they refuse to admit it publicly. Because a trial would not just expose Blake, it would drag Taylor into the storm as well. And Taylor is the last person who wants this circus. Because for her, the personal brand, the image, the empire is built on meticulous control of her narrative. And the moment those texts come out, that control evaporates. Imagine the frenzy fans poring over every emoji, every word, dissecting the timeline of their friendship, twisting it into headlines and hashtags and viral storms, and Taylor knows once it is out, she cannot put it back in the box. So her lawyers are aligning with the same strategy. Get this case buried in settlement, keep everything under wraps, and close the door forever. And let me remind you of the human element here, because I got just a taste of what it feels like to be dragged into a saga like this for 3 months. I lived it. I breathed it. I fought it. And it nearly broke me. And now imagine what it feels like for the Wayfarer defendants, for Ryan Reynolds, for Stephanie Jones, for everyone who has been under this cloud since 2023, some for over 2 years now. The toll it takes is enormous on careers, on mental health, on relationships. And even when they are innocent, even when they believe they did nothing wrong, the process itself is punishing. It drains you. It wears you down. And that is exactly why my sources say many of them are desperate for closure. They want this to end. They want the silence they want to move on, because for them, every additional day is another wound, another headline, another sleepless night. And do not underestimate the fact that some of them have already seen what happens when private texts leak, when fragments of conversations get twisted out of context and weaponized in the public arena. They know the cost. They know the humiliation. They know the endless speculation. And the truth is, nobody wants to live through that again. Least of all Blake, because my sources insist that some of the things she said to her publicist are damning, not in a criminal sense, but in a reputational sense. Things that contradict her public story. Things that reveal a different perspective entirely. Things that would make people question her motives. And once those questions are asked out loud, the narrative she has fought so hard to control unravels, thread by thread. And that is why she clings to this lawsuit. Not because she wants justice, not because she wants a jury verdict, but because it keeps the option of silence alive. And as long as silence is still possible, as long as settlement is still on the table, she has hope of saving what matters most. Her image, her career, her standing. And here is where the suspense builds. Because the closer we get to deadlines, the more pressure mounts on both sides, and the more likely it becomes that we will see some form of agreement quietly signed in the dead of night, buried deep away from cameras, but with consequences that will echo forever, because the public will never stop wondering what was really said, what was really hidden, what was really agreed to in those rooms. And now, my fam, let us push deeper into the shadows of this Hollywood saga. Because if you thought the revelations so far were shocking, you have not yet seen the full scope of what is at stake. Because this story is no longer about a simple lawsuit. This is about reputations. This is about carefully crafted public images. This is about careers that have been built over decades and the truth that could shatter them in an instant. So let us peel back another layer and examine why Blake is still pressing forward in public, while behind closed doors, her team is quietly preparing for the very settlement that she pretends to resist. Because make no mistake, this is not a woman charging into court with confidence. This is a woman desperately playing a high-stakes game of appearances, because she understands that if she shows weakness, she loses leverage. And if she loses leverage, she loses the power to negotiate terms that could protect her from the most devastating fallout. And here is where the suspense becomes almost unbearable. Because every single move, every filing, every statement, every leak is part of a calculated dance, where each side is signaling strength while internally calculating risk. And the risks are massive. Because remember, those texts between Blake and Taylor, they are not a simple set of friendly chats. They are a minefield, one that, if triggered, could detonate across every corner of their lives. And those messages do not just reveal what Blake said. They reveal how she framed her story to Taylor, what details she shared, what she withheld, and how those choices reveal a deeper truth about her credibility. And it is not just about Taylor either. Because once you consider the text to Leslie Sloan, her publicist, the picture becomes even clearer, because publicists exist to protect the image, to manage the story, to craft the narrative. And if what Blake told her behind the scenes differs from what she told the world, then the entire foundation of her case crumbles. And when my source told me bluntly that legal has had access to all of these texts, and they are not good for Blake, it was a chilling reminder that the truth always finds its way to the surface. Eventually, no matter how tightly, someone tries to control it. But let us pause here and ask why Taylor is so central to this, and the answer is simple. Taylor is not just any witness. She is the witness. She is the global icon whose name attached to this case sends shockwaves through the industry. She is the friend whose presence raises the stakes 1,000 times higher, and she is the one who above all cannot afford for her private life to be dissected in the court of law or the court of public opinion. And so her lawyers, the best of the best, are working tirelessly to ensure those texts never become public evidence. And here lies the delicate balance, because if Blake pushes too hard, if she insists on trial, if she allows this case to cross the threshold into open court, she risks dragging Taylor into a battle that neither of them can truly win. Because even if Taylor herself is not on trial, the exposure, the intrusion, the speculation would be merciless. Fans would pick apart every sentence, tabloids would print headlines for months, and the entire spectacle would become bigger than the lawsuit itself. And this is precisely why Blake will never let that happen. Because while she may be willing to risk her own reputation, she will not risk Taylor's wrath. She will not risk destroying that connection. And so a settlement is not just likely, it is inevitable, because it protects them both. And as I reflect on this, I cannot help but think of the wider circle, the Wayfarer defendants who have been caught in this storm since 2023, who have endured years of whispers, headlines, and court filings without resolution. They are tired, they are drained, and they are desperate for this to end. They want the silence, they want the confidentiality, they want their lives back, and who can blame them? Because when every text, every email, every private thought becomes potential evidence, the weight of it crushes you, and I know because I felt it for months and it nearly consumed me. And so I send them light, I send them strength. I send them the reminder that even in the darkest saga, there is always a way through. But the question remains, what happens if somehow settlement fails? What happens if pride or ego or stubbornness pushes this case to trial? Then we will see the unthinkable. Then we will see those texts entered into evidence. Then we will watch as the world devours every word between Blake and Taylor, between Blake and Leslie, between Blake and Stephanie. And once that happens, there is no return, no silence, no control, only chaos and scandal and fallout that could reshape careers forever. And let us not forget Ryan Reynolds. His name may not be front and center in the filings, but you better believe his presence hovers over every decision, because he too would be silenced in any settlement. His voice tied down by confidentiality. His role locked in secrecy, and for a man who thrives on wit and public persona, that silence would be deafening but necessary, because without it, the alternative is devastation. And so as we inch closer to the next court date, to the next filing, to the next whispered leak, the suspense builds and builds. Will they settle? Will they risk trial? Will the texts remain hidden, or will they be exposed? And every day that passes without resolution is another day of uncertainty, another day where Hollywood holds its breath, waiting to see whether one of its brightest stars will fall, or whether she will escape into the shadows with a carefully negotiated silence that leaves the public forever wondering what really happened and what was really said. And now, my fam, we arrive at the edge of the cliff, the final stretch of this unbelievable saga. And I need you to understand just how delicate this moment is, because what happens next will define not just the outcome of this lawsuit, but the legacy of everyone involved, because Blake Lively has placed herself in a position where every path forward is dangerous, where every choice carries consequences that could echo for years. And as her team weighs the options they know, the dangers they know, that trial means exposure. That trial means those texts, those conversations, those omissions, those contradictions, all laid bare for the world to see. And they also know that settlement means silence, but also means surrender of control. It means the story never gets told on her terms. It means living forever with the whispers, the speculation, the questions about what really happened. And yet between these two terrifying paths, settlement is the lesser risk, and that is why I believe it is coming. sooner than anyone expects, because the closer we get to trial, the more pressure builds from all sides. From Taylor's team, from Justin's team, from the Wayfarer defendants, from Stephanie Jones, from Ryan Reynolds, from every single player who has a stake in burying this quietly and walking away with at least some shred of dignity intact. And you can already see the groundwork being laid. The leaks, the strategic hints, the quiet reminders that nobody truly wants this to go before a jury. And my sources insist that these negotiations are already happening in the shadows. Lawyers drafting language, debating clauses, calculating exactly how to word statements so that each side can spin it as a win, while hiding the reality that the truth will remain locked away forever. And let me tell you, this is not unusual. Hollywood thrives on settlements because the one thing stars fear more than anything is exposure. They can endure speculation, they can endure rumors, but they cannot endure their private messages, their raw, unfiltered words becoming public record. And that is why this entire case feels like a ticking clock, counting down to an agreement that will never satisfy the public, because the public wants answers. The public wants to see the receipts, wants to know exactly what Blake said to Taylor, exactly what she confessed to Leslie, exactly what she whispered to Stephanie, but they will never get that. Because if the settlement happens, and it almost certainly will, confidentiality will slam that door shut forever. And still, the irony is that the silence will only fuel more questions, because once you tell the world you cannot speak about something, the world becomes desperate to know why, and speculation becomes its own beast, feeding on fragments and whispers and half-truths until it becomes larger than life. And that may be the cruelest twist of all, because Blake, in her effort to protect herself, may end up haunted by rumors more damaging than the truth would have been. But that is the gamble she is choosing, and it is one that will shape her career, her reputation, her friendships, and even her marriage for years to come. And let us not forget that Taylor, too, is entangled in this web, even if she never appears in court, even if she never speaks publicly about it. Her name is now part of the record, her texts are now part of the whispers, and her team is working tirelessly to shield her, but they cannot erase the fact that her private words have been read, studied, analyzed by lawyers, and that knowledge alone is enough to create tension, to create unease. Because when you are Taylor Swift and your words carry the power to shape headlines around the globe, every single sentence matters. And the thought that those sentences could one day leak is a nightmare no artist, no public figure wants to face. So yes, she will push hard for settlement. Yes, she will throw the full weight of her influence behind it. And that is why the outcome feels inevitable, but inevitability does not make it less dramatic. Inevitability only makes the suspense heavier, because we are all watching the same clock tick down, waiting to see the official word, waiting to see whether the documents will be signed, whether the silence will be purchased, whether the storm will finally end. And yet there is always that slim possibility that pride or anger or ego could derail the plan, that one side could refuse to bend, that one lawyer could decide to roll the dice. And if that happens, if trial truly comes, then my friends, Hollywood will witness a scandal of historic proportions, the kind of scandal that changes everything, the kind of scandal that no carefully written press release can contain. And while I believe settlement is the likeliest path, I cannot deny that the possibility of exposure remains. And it is that very possibility that keeps us all watching, that keeps us all waiting, that keeps us all hanging on every update, every rumor, every leak. Because in the end, this is not just about law, this is about power and secrets and control and the fragile images that celebrities fight to protect. And that is why this story will not let go of us. Because until the papers are signed, until the gag is in place, until the silence is official, the danger remains. The danger that one day we will all see those texts, read them for ourselves, and finally understand what was really said, what was really hidden, and why this battle was fought so fiercely in the first place. So fam, as we come to the end of this wild journey, let me leave you with this final thought, because what we have uncovered here is not just another Hollywood feud. It is a case study in how power and image and silence collide, because Blake knows she cannot risk a trial. She knows her texts to Taylor, her texts to Leslie, her words to Stephanie all carry the weight of truth that could destroy the story she has so carefully told, and Taylor knows she cannot risk exposure, because her empire, her artistry, her legacy depend on privacy and control. And Justin knows that as long as he holds the texts, he holds the leverage. And so everyone is trapped in this web, each one afraid of what comes next, each one desperate to keep control but unable to truly win, because in the end, a settlement will not clear the air. It will only thicken the fog, leaving us all to wonder what really happened, what was really said and what was left unsaid, and that mystery will linger like a shadow over every red carpet, every interview, every headline, because silence may protect them, but it will never satisfy us. And perhaps that is the most dramatic ending of all. A case that concludes not with answers, but with questions that echo louder than any courtroom verdict could ever deliver.